Well, it's another Monday, and that's why we're playing the blues. This is a tune called Slow Day Blues, and you're listening to Watchman Internet Radio. That song is enough to make your hound dog wail. Well, my name is Robert King. You probably knew that. It says it right there on my YouTube channel. Thank you for listening. I hope you all are doing well. I'm feeling rather perky today. We're not going to read the daily text. I use that, kind of as a springboard to get me going on something. What we are going to talk about today, I have some questions from a viewer / listener, reader, whatever. And before we get to that, I just want to mention that questions are what get me going as well. I have a mailbag feature that has been part of ewatchman.com since the beginning. And, your questions prime my brain and get me thinking about different topics. And so if you have questions, even maybe if you know the answer to it, but you just want to throw me a bone, feel free. And, I'll run with it. Send it to me at watchmanspost@gmail.com. Well, this person has 4 questions here, not necessarily related. Question number 1 is, what exactly did T.C. Russell mean when he said, "The kings have had their day"? And for those who may be uninformed, back in 1914, of course, the Watchtower had been talking about 1914 for many years, several decades prior to 1914, expecting it, of course, to be Armageddon. But then when World War I began in August, at least the nations declared war upon each other and sent their armies off to the front. No actual shooting had begun at that point, I don't think. But anyway, on October the 2nd, C.T. Russell came to the Bethel family at breakfast and with this grand announcement that the Gentile times have ended, their kings have had their day. Well, what did he mean? Well, it's always been understood by first the Bible students and Jehovah's Witnesses that the kings having had their day meant that Jesus Christ was ruling. We do know from the scriptures that there is a brief overlap, an interim period, where Jesus becomes king, and yet he's ruling in the midst of his enemies because Satan is still ruling over this world. So there's a brief period of what we call an overlap. The Watchtower has always cited the 2nd Psalm, and that's where it says, "Why are the nations agitated and the peoples muttering an empty thing? The kings of the earth take their stand, and high officials gather together as one against Jehovah and against his anointed one. So the Watchtower claims that that is what took place during World War I, and that they're coming against Jehovah and his king as one was reflected after the war with the establishment of the League of Nations, because it was intended to be a world government, but it was no such thing. And as I've pointed out many times, the United States wasn't even a member, nor were a number of other countries, and the whole thing just fell apart. So how could that have been the fulfillment of this prophecy? Well, anyway, that's where Russell got this idea that the kings have had their day. It is embarrassing. It should be embarrassing to all of Jehovah's Witnesses that the Watchtower still clings to this. The kings have had their day 100 years ago. The kings have had their day. And here we are 105 years later, and the nations of this world are as entrenched as ever and going about their business as before. So obviously something is very, very wrong. The Watchtower will never come to terms with it, of course. It's going to take the actual coming of Christ to explode the whole thing, and that's going to be a mess. But let it happen. Come, Lord Jesus, is what I say. Now, here's an interesting question. Where does the Bible identify the Masonic Illuminati humans that are working and manipulating things behind the scenes? Well, I've never indicated that it really does. We do know that Satan, the devil, is the ruler of this world. Revelation depicts his government in heaven as a seven-headed fiery dragon. And it explains that this is Satan the devil, who is misleading the entire inhabited earth. Well, each one of those seven heads on this dragon in heaven corresponds to one of the heads of the wild beast, the seven-headed wild beast. So Satan is able to get these empires to do his bidding. And he does that through a small number of humans who he uses to influence a larger number. There have always been secret societies, and apparently that is one tool that Satan uses to manipulate and deceive humans into doing his bidding. I wrote an article a number of years ago. In fact, it was one of the first articles that I had written and published on the internet back in 2002, or it may have been 2003, I can't remember, but it's called The Secret Society of Lucifer. It's on page 1 and at the very bottom if you want to index it. If I remember, I'll put a link on this YouTube video. But the date says 2009, and that is because that is when I set up this WordPress website and ported everything over from a previous website. When I started out in 2002, that was before blogs really came into existence, and you had to know some HTML coding in order to set up a website, and that was way out of my league, and so I had to have a partner, and me and Timothy Klein worked together for a number of years, and then by that time blogging came into vogue, and I was able to run my own site as far as posting and everything. Timothy still runs the back end of things for me, so we've had a long collaboration. I've run off the rails here, haven't I? Yeah. Anyway, this article. I slightly edited this article because I reread it this morning. It's been many, many years since I've written it, as I said. And I cite the June 1st, 1997 issue of the Watchtower, because in the original article here, I quoted the Watchtower saying that they had an article entitled Secret Societies, How Great the Threat. So I thought I would link to it because when I wrote the original article, that article, Watchtower article, wasn't online. And now the Watchtower has put all that stuff up. But I was rereading the Watchtower article, and it's different. It doesn't say secret societies, how great the threat. And I looked on my CD-ROM, and it doesn't say what I thought it said either. So I'm wondering if this is a case of the Watchtower rewriting something and when they put it back online. They've been known to do that. There's nothing wrong with that as long as you let the readers know, hey, we've made an edit, but they're not that above board, unfortunately. But I know some of you are real keen, eagle-eyed Watchtower archivists. Check that out. If you have an older issue of the June 1st, 1997 Watchtower, or maybe it might be on an older CD-ROM, I don't know. But I'm quite sure that my mind is not that far gone that I would have, because I usually, do my research pretty well. I might make a few typos, but I had written here the name of this article, and it's no longer the name of that article. Anyway, I made a note of that on the article that I edited this morning. Anyway, I'm just going to read this article, maybe brush over a few things. But I comment how the Watchtower article gives a superficial overview of how secret societies are believed to function. And while not terribly enlightening, the article ended affirming the question posed. Yes, indeed. Who can really know how many secret groups may be at this very moment posing a threat greater than any of us might imagine? And the article following that went on to mention several secretive religious cults, leaving the reader the impression that religious secret societies pose the greatest threat. Well, anyone who has studied secret societies know that they're far more dangerous groups than the ones alluded to in this brief Watchtower article. It is the belief of many so-called conspiracy theorists that there is a tiered grouping consisting of layers of semi-secret and secret societies that are under the control of a singular occultic society of ultra-wealthy oligarchs. Some researchers believe that the upper level refers to their coven as the Illuminati, which means in Latin, the enlightened ones. That may or may not be true. Most likely, Illuminati is simply a generic term. The name, though, is not important. Nevertheless, the men at the pinnacle of power, whatever they call themselves, apparently do share a common trait. They are driven by a ruthless desire to have absolute mastery over all peoples and nations of this earth. One secret society dedicated to the overthrow of the nation-state system, whose existence has been acknowledged by the United States and other governments' intelligence agencies, has been defined by them as Synarchists International. Synarchism, so named as a synergy of communism and Nazism. However, Synarchism itself springs from Martinism and Freemasonry, dating back to the French Revolution and the Napoleonic era. In an article entitled, "What is a Rohatyn?" referring to Felix Rohatyn, EIR documents how a U.S. ambassador by the name of Anthony Beidel informed President Roosevelt in 1942 of the existence of a secret clique in France, which controlled the Nazi-friendly Vichy government at the time. He went on to reveal to the president that the Synarchist clique was an intermediary secret society controlled by the Bank of Worms and Lézard Frères of Paris. Ambassador Beidel also shed some light on what he called the superior level of the secret society pyramid. He wrote, "The superior secret societies are still more secret, if I may say so, than the intermediary secret societies. Neither their name nor their existence nor their names of their members are known. In general, they contain only a small number of members, no more than 100 or 200, and sometimes less, but assembling in their hands either immense political powers or immense capital. These secret societies are behind the intermediary secret societies. They organize them, inspire them, finance and direct them, often without the knowledge of the latter. There exists a set of converging proofs that lead one to think that at least two such superior secret societies are in existence today. The first one was formed in earlier times by a powerful group of representatives of the main ruling families of Europe, as well as the members of the high nobility. On the other hand, a second secret society of this type, which has been in existence for at least a quarter of a century in Europe, unites a large portion of the industries in France and in the United States, less in England. Proof of its activities has been found as early as 1924, and its existence is no longer deniable. It secretly directs the synarchist movement inside the biggest countries, and seem to have been in very close contact with European fascist governments, which have emerged since 1922. That's end of quote. The article that I've written goes on. It says, the same invisible lines of power exist today that were behind the horrors of fascism and communism over half a century ago. Since then, the controlling powers have spawned numerous intermediary secret societies such as the Bilderbergers and the Council on Foreign Relations and others, which are the visible power structures used to control political and business affairs. The CFR is the American counterpart of the British Royal Institute of International Affairs, also known as Chatham House. Together, these two institutions form the visible part of the intellectual foundation of a policy-shaping organ of the Anglo-American dyad. The continuity of the conspiracy is no doubt because the same demonic principalities exist now as hundreds of years ago and are intent on perpetuating their scheme of empowering small cliques of men in order to manipulate the entire world according to their evil designs. The question is, will the satanically illuminated conspirators succeed in establishing their totalitarian new world order? According to no less an authority than Jehovah God, the one who sees from the beginning to the end, the answer is yes. Fittingly, the now dawning Neo-Babylonian New World Order is typified in prophecy by Babylon itself. And the greatest irony is that the devilish scheme to tyrannize the world is actually sanctioned by Jehovah. In the opening verses of the 13th chapter of Isaiah, Jehovah acquisitions Babylon's army and sanctifies them as his own agency for expressing his anger upon all the nations. Quote, I myself have issued the command to my sanctified ones. I have also called my mighty ones for expressing my anger, my eminently exultant ones. Listen, a crowd in the mountains, something like a numerous people. Listen, the uproar of kingdoms, of nations gathered together. Jehovah of armies is mustering the army of war. They are coming from the land far away, from the extremity of the heavens. Jehovah, and the weapons of his denunciation to wreck all the earth. A question thinking Bible students ought to ask is if the Babylonian conquest of the ancient world, Judah included, has relevance for the judgment to come. Again, the answer is yes. Consider Isaiah 13:6-8, which reads, "Howl, you people, for the day of Jehovah is near. As a despoiling from the Almighty, it will come. That is why all hands themselves will drop down, and the whole heart itself of mortal man will melt, and people have become disturbed. Convulsions and birth pangs themselves grab hold. Like a woman that is giving birth, they have labor pains. They look at each other in amazement. Their faces are inflamed faces." The despoiling brought on by the king of Babylon coincides with the commencement of the day of Jehovah, foreshadowing the ultimate day of Jehovah at the conclusion of the system. Numerous facets of the 13th and 14th chapter of Isaiah overlap certain features of the prophecy of Joel, which the Apostle Peter specifically applied to the last days, describes a similar effect upon people as prophesied by Isaiah. For instance, Joel 2:6 states, "Because of it," Jehovah's onrushing military force, "people will be in severe pains. For all faces they will certainly collect a glow of excitement." Or, as it said in Isaiah, inflamed faces. Interestingly, foretelling Jehovah's ultimate judgment upon the presumptuous Chaldean for his having disabled the nations, the King James Version of Isaiah 14:12 states, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the earth, which didst weaken the nations? How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the earth, which didst weaken the nations?" That's not easy to read, that in English, is it? Okay, so the New World Translation and most other modern translations do not use the term Lucifer at Isaiah 14:12, instead using the term shining one or son of the dawn. But what exactly is the meaning of the word Lucifer? It is drawn from Latin meaning light bearer or enlightened one. It has unfortunately been wrongly applied to Satan the devil, as if his personal name. However, it is apparent by its uses in Isaiah that Jehovah applied the title to the king of Babylon. What is most significant is that the Shining One attempts to elevate himself over God. How is that possible? The extent of the downfall of Lucifer explains. "Oh, how you have fallen from heaven, you Shining One, son of the dawn! How you have been cut down to the earth, you who were disabling the nations! As for you, you said in your heart, 'To the heavens I shall go up. Above the stars of God I shall lift up my throne, and I shall sit down upon the mountain of meeting in the remotest parts of the north. I shall go up above the high places of the clouds. I shall make myself resemble the Most High. However, down to Sheol you will be brought, to the remotest parts of the pit.'" The Shining One lifts himself above the stars of God by killing the anointed sons of the kingdom, who at that time will be ruling with Christ. He makes himself resemble the Most High by establishing his own throne over the nations as a counterfeit world government, a new world order, and he'll attempt to simulate the morning-like dawning of the very kingdom of God. In view of the fact that there has been a long-running conspiracy to establish a world government and abolish all traces of Christianity, the evidence being well established of the existence of a powerful occultic secret society of men who consider themselves to be the illuminated ones. For all who wish to know of such evils, the inevitable crisis soon to engulf the world must surely be the initial phase of the rise of Lucifer, or, more correctly, the fall of Satan. Perhaps the ultimate irony, though, is that Jehovah has his own secret society, that being the society of anointed ones. Paul described those in union with Christ as being illuminated with the sacred secrets hidden from the world and being secreted away in God, due to be revealed during the revelation of Christ, when the sons of God will also be revealed before all creation. During the time of the end, just ahead of us, the sons of God will shine like the sun in the sky in the full glory of Jehovah. Lucifer will prove to be a pale imitation in comparison to the true, illuminated sons of the dawn. And that's the end of that article. Well, we could say a lot more on that topic. I really didn't go into it in that article, but I have in other articles and videos talking about the man of lawlessness. And no doubt there obviously has been an infiltration of the Watchtower from the very beginning by this satanic cult. Masons, they leave their little calling cards here and there. And no doubt when Christ comes, then this man of lawlessness will declare himself to be a god and persecute the true sons of the kingdom until the manifestation of Christ does away with him. Okay, his third question, he states, do the screenshots below, if true, indicate that the Watchtower prediction that the dual world power will be the last might be wrong or obsolete if China has indeed now ascended to world power status? I'm not going to take the time to read all of that, but a lot of people think they know how the world works, and they don't. There's a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and keep in mind that the scriptures say that this king of the north rules by deception. He succeeds. And to illustrate that very point, how many people believe that the British Empire still exists? Because according to history books, it no longer exists. Great Britain is a third-rate power, blah, blah, blah. And yet, London is the seat of Satan's empire over the world. And it is at war with modern civilization. The iron and the clay, he has a fourth question there asking about the iron and the clay, so I'll just go ahead and mention that. As I've written, and the Watchtower now says it as well, the iron and clay represent the Anglo-American duo. The iron is the British Empire. It's not Great Britain. Great Britain was merely home to this empire. The clay represents the Republic, the people who are having a say in their government. And those two forces those two materials don't stick together, the iron and the clay. They're antithetical. And that, if you understand that, you understand what has been driving history. For example, in the screenshot of the comment he left me, he referred to Churchill and Franklin Roosevelt as both being flunkies of this Illuminati Rothschild banking cartel. And that tells me that they don't know what they're talking about. because, going back after World War I, the British Empire knew that they would become irrelevant if they didn't take the United States down. And they orchestrated the Great Depression to destroy, ruin America financially. They actually orchestrated a coup, but it was spoiled by General Smedley Butler. Similar to what's going on now. There's a soft coup to overthrow President Trump, but there was an actual coup planned, a military coup to overthrow Roosevelt during the Depression. Roosevelt actually put some of the bankers in jail. He referred to them as economic royalists. And even to this day, certain factions in the British Wall Street ruling class hate Roosevelt. And that's where this business comes from. He was an Illuminati flunky. Well, no, he wasn't. He stood up against these money barons, and he saved the United States from ruination. He pulled the United States out of the Great Depression. He started all of these great infrastructure projects during the Depression. And of course, World War II started, and that really ramped up the manufacturing production capacity of the United States. At any rate, China is on the verge of, on par with Europe and the United States. And it's developing other parts of the world that the British Empire has not allowed to develop. South Asia and Africa and even South America now with their new Silk Road, the one road, one belt. The British Empire is terrified that President Trump is going to join in this giant project, which would be a renaissance for mankind, really. Donald Trump said he wondered what's wrong with having friendly relations with Russia. And he says he's great friends with President Xi of China. The empire will not allow that. Whether they can get him impeached or it just came out now, there was a conspiracy underway to have him removed from the presidency, according to the provision of the 25th Amendment, saying that if his cabinet members and vice president say he was unable to carry out his duties, well, that's what they're afraid of, that he is able to carry out his duties. Well, I don't know what will become of that. Maybe an assassination, or maybe they'll tip the world into war, whatever. I don't have that insight. But what I do know is that at some point the whole system will come down. The British Empire, as it exists now, will not allow China or any other power to supersede it. It will blow the world up before it allows that to happen. And that's what's going to happen. They're going to scuttle the whole system and from the ruins bring on the eighth king. That's something that Jehovah's Witnesses simply cannot grasp, cannot appreciate, because the Watchtower says that the eighth king is already ruling. The seventh and the eighth king are ruling concurrently. The eighth king started ruling in 1922 with the League of Nations. And none of Jehovah's Witnesses can answer the simple question. Because when the eighth king begins ruling, all of those who give their support to the eighth king do not have their names written in the book of life. They receive the second death, the mark of the beast. And yet, the Watchtower says that the eighth king has been ruling for this century now, practically. Well, what's the point of preaching? What's the point of offering salvation to a world of mankind if they've already been consigned to everlasting death for worshiping this beast, this image of the beast, which we know is the eighth king? Obviously, the eighth king has not begun ruling. And you'll know when it is, because it'll be after this system crashes. Anyway, I'm about talked out. And like I say, if you have questions, please send them my way. And we'll talk to you another day. Let's get back to some blues.